Cesar Milan, the world-famous dog whisperer, who built a multi-million-dollar empire on his unique approach to dog training, was sentenced to 15 years in prison today, following convictions on multiple counts of animal cruelty and fraud. The 54-year-old celebrity trainer showed visible shock as Judge Eleanor Ramirez delivered the sentence that will dismantle his global business and tarnish a legacy built over decades. The case against Milan began 2 years ago when an undercover investigation by animal welfare organizations captured footage of training methods at his dog psychology center in California that prosecutors described as systematically abusive and inhumane. The investigation, which spanned 18 months, was initiated after several former employees approached the American Humane Association with concerns about practices they had witnessed but had been prevented from reporting due to strict non-disclosure agreements. Sarah Lawson, a former assistant trainer who worked at the facility for 3 years, became the primary whistleblower after documenting what she described as escalating patterns of abuse that were concealed from public view. Lawson worked with investigators to place hidden cameras throughout the training facility, capturing thousands of hours of unedited footage that showed training sessions conducted when television crews were not present. What the public saw on TV and what happened when cameras weren't rolling were completely different realities, Lawson testified during the trial. The miraculous transformations viewers saw were often the result of methods that left dogs shut down from fear rather than genuinely rehabilitated. Dr. James Morrison, a veterinary behaviorist who testified as an expert witness, described the footage as disturbing and contrary to all modern understanding of humane animal training. Morrison told the court that Milan's methods relied on fear, intimidation, and pain, rather than the science-based positive reinforcement techniques endorsed by the veterinary community. Morrison's testimony included a detailed analysis of more than 50 training sessions documented in the undercover footage. He identified numerous instances where dogs displayed what he termed fear responses, including whale eye, showing the whites of the eyes, excessive panting, tucked tails, and freezing behaviors that Milan misinterpreted or misrepresented as calm submission. What viewers were taught to see as a rehabilitated dog was often actually displaying classic signs of learned helplessness, a psychological condition where an animal stops responding after repeated exposure to aversive stimuli it cannot escape. Morrison explained to the court, "This isn't rehabilitation, it's traumatization." The most damaging evidence came from hidden camera footage showing training sessions away from television cameras, where Milan's methods allegedly differed significantly from the edited versions shown on his popular television programs. Prosecutors presented over 30 hours of video evidence showing what they characterized as systematic abuse disguised as training. In one particularly disturbing clip, Milan was shown using a shock collar on high settings that caused visible distress to a German shepherd with anxiety issues. Court documents revealed that the dog later developed severe stress-related behaviors that rendered it unadoptable and resulted in euthanasia. Other footage showed the use of choke chains and physical force that experts testified caused psychological trauma to the animals. The prosecution presented a case study of 27 dogs that had appeared on Milan's television shows, tracking their progress after their on-camera rehabilitation. The investigation revealed that 21 of these dogs later developed new or worsened behavioral problems, with several later euthanized for aggression that emerged after training. These outcomes were never shared with viewers, who were left with the impression of universal success. Particularly damning was footage of a Jack Russell Terrier named Max, who had appeared in a 2014 episode where Milan seemingly cured his food aggression. The hidden cameras revealed that after the episode, Max developed such severe generalized anxiety that he began self-mutilating and eventually had to be medicated for the remainder of his life. Beyond the animal cruelty charges, the case expanded to include fraud, after investigators discovered that Milan had misrepresented his success rates to clients who paid thousands of dollars for his services. Financial records revealed that his business had a policy of requiring clients to sign non-disclosure agreements when dogs showed no improvement or developed worsened behavior problems after training. The fraud charges were substantiated by internal company emails discussing what executives termed outcome management, a system designed to highlight successes while concealing failures. One email from Milan's business partner to the client services team instructed staff to ensure all testimonials come only from the success column, and to Transition unsuccessful clients out quietly with refunds if necessary, provided they sign enhanced NDAs. Former employees testified that the organization maintained two sets of records: public success stories used for marketing and private documentation of numerous cases where dogs developed increased aggression, fear, or anxiety following Milan's interventions. Lisa Hernandez, who worked as client relations manager at the Dog Psychology Center for 4 years, testified that staff were instructed to reframe failures as owner non-compliance, rather than acknowledge any shortcomings in the training methods. We were told to tell clients that any regression in their dog's behavior was because they weren't being assertive enough or maintaining calm assertive energy, like Cesar, Hernandez testified. We knew many dogs were getting worse, not better, but the company line was always that the method works when applied correctly. Carlos Rodriguez, who had worked as an assistant trainer under Milan for 6 years, provided some of the most damaging testimony. We had code words to use when a dog was shut down from fear, but we needed to present it as successful training, Rodriguez told the court. We'd say the dog was finding balance or accepting leadership, when in reality, the animal was terrified and suppressing all normal behaviors. Rodriguez described how trainers would use increasingly aversive methods when cameras weren't present if dogs didn't respond quickly enough to milder corrections. The priority was always getting fast results that looked good on camera, not what was actually happening inside the dog's mind, or what would happen after the cameras left, he stated. The prosecution also presented evidence that Milan lacked formal education in animal behavior or veterinary science, despite marketing himself as an expert. Internal communications revealed that he had directed staff to deflect questions about his credentials and to emphasize his natural gift instead of scientific training. Marketing materials and press kits distributed by Milan's companies consistently referred to him as a behaviorist and canine expert, terms that suggested professional qualifications he did not possess. Prosecutors argued that this misrepresentation was deliberate and designed to lend scientific credibility to methods that contradicted established behavioral science. Dr. Catherine Wilson, president of the American College of Veterinary Behaviorists, testified that Milan's use of these professional-sounding titles misled the public. There are specific educational requirements and ethical standards required to legitimately call oneself a behaviorist in the animal field, Wilson explained. Using these terms without the appropriate background is not just misleading, it can be dangerous when it leads people to employ methods that can harm their animals. During the 6-week trial, more than 40 former clients testified about experiences with Milan's methods that resulted in their dogs developing fear-based behaviors, including several cases where previously non-aggressive dogs became dangerous after training. Robert Gonzalez described how his Labrador Retriever became so fearful after sessions at the Dog Psychology Center that it began to show aggression toward children. We brought in a friendly, excitable dog with some leash-pulling issues, and after Cesar's methods, we got back a fearful animal that couldn't be trusted around our kids, Gonzalez told the court. It cost us thousands of dollars in rehabilitation, with actual certified behaviorists to undo the damage. Jennifer Martinez testified about paying $15,000 for her rescue pit bull mix to attend Milan's rehabilitation camp for 2 weeks to address resource guarding. When I picked him up, they told me he was cured, Martinez said. 3 days later, he bit my husband severely enough to require stitches. When I called for help, they told me I must be projecting fear and undermining the training. Multiple witnesses recounted similar experiences of being blamed when Milan's methods failed. Patricia Wong described how her Shih Tzu developed severe separation anxiety after training. They told me the dog was picking up on my energy and that I needed more sessions to learn how to be a pack leader. They wanted another $5,000, but my dog was worse than before we started. Perhaps most damaging to Milan's defense was testimony from former television production staff, who described how footage was heavily edited to show positive outcomes while removing scenes where dogs showed signs of distress or where methods didn't produce results. Emma Chen, a former editor on Milan's television series, testified that producers were instructed to cut around anything that makes Cesar or the method look ineffective, and to focus on immediate compliance rather than the dog's emotional state. We had explicit instructions to edit out stress signals like lip licking, whale eye, or yawning, Chen told the court. If a dog was panting heavily or tucking its tail, We would use a camera angle that didn't show it or cut to a reaction shot of the owner instead. Michael Torres, a former field producer, described how shoots would sometimes last for hours until they captured the few minutes of footage that made it appear the training had been instantly successful. What viewers saw as a miracle moment that took 5 minutes was often actually the result of hours of escalating pressure on the dog until it finally shut down, Torres testified. Torres presented the court with original, unedited footage from 3 episodes that showed dogs responding with fear and stress signals that were edited out of the broadcast versions. In one particularly striking comparison, a dog shown calmly walking beside Milan in the aired episode was revealed in the unedited footage to have been trembling visibly and attempting to flee before being forcibly restrained. Throughout the trial, Milan's defense team attempted to portray his methods as misunderstood and appropriate for certain dogs with severe behavioral issues. They brought in several satisfied clients who credited Milan with saving their dogs from euthanasia and improving dangerous behaviors. Defense attorney Michael Rodriguez argued that cultural differences influence perspectives on training methods, suggesting that criticism of Milan's techniques reflected American sensitivity rather than universal standards of animal welfare. This line of argument backfired when prosecutors presented statements from international animal welfare organizations and veterinary associations from around the world condemning the techniques in question. The defense also argued that television productions naturally edited content for entertainment value and time constraints, but that the underlying methods were sound when properly applied. This strategy collapsed when prosecutors produced internal emails discussing how to manage the optics of techniques that might generate public criticism. One particularly damaging email from a network executive to the production team read, "We need to be careful about showing too much of the prong collar work. Focus on the results, not how we get there. The average viewer doesn't understand what it takes to fix these red zone dogs." Dr. Brian Hare, a canine cognition expert from Duke University who testified for the prosecution, directly challenged the scientific basis of Milan's approach. The entire premise of the dominance theory that underpins Mr. Milan's method has been thoroughly debunked by modern science, Hare explained. Dogs are not constantly trying to dominate humans, and their problem behaviors are rarely rooted in a lack of dominance from their owners. Hare presented research showing that many behaviors Milan attributed to dominance were actually manifestations of fear, anxiety, or confusion. Interpreting fear as dominance and responding with intimidation creates a vicious cycle that damages the human-animal bond and often exacerbates the very problems it claims to solve, he told the court. The defense's attempt to present Milan as simply using old-school methods accepted in many cultures was further undermined by testimony from Eduardo Fernandez, a certified dog trainer from Mexico. "This is not about cultural differences," Fernandez stated. "Modern, humane training methods are the scientific standard across cultures. Mr. Milan's techniques would be considered outdated and inappropriate in Mexico, in the United States, or anywhere else." As the guilty verdict was read last week, Milan appeared stunned, repeatedly shaking his head in disbelief. His celebrity status had visibly diminished throughout the trial, with former Hollywood supporters distancing themselves as evidence mounted. The courtroom today was notably absent of the famous faces that had once prominently endorsed his methods. During today's sentencing hearing, Judge Ramirez allowed impact statements from several animal welfare organizations. Jennifer Moss from the American Veterinary Society of Animal Behavior described how Milan's widespread influence had set back humane training methods by decades and created a generation of dog owners who believe dominance and force are necessary for training. "The damage extends far beyond the individual animals Mr. Milan handled personally," Moss stated. "Millions of dogs have been subjected to outdated and harmful methods by owners emulating what they saw on television, believing it was endorsed by experts." Richard Torres from the Association of Professional Dog Trainers told the court that certified trainers around the country regularly deal with the aftermath of owners attempting to implement Milan's methods. "We see the fallout every day," Torres said. "Dogs with new fear-based aggression, dogs who have shut down emotionally, and owners who have damaged their relationship with their pets by trying to be pack leaders through intimidation." Animal behaviorist Dr. Sophia Lee presented research data showing an increase in dog bites and surrenders to shelters that correlated with the popularity of dominance-based training methods. While acknowledging that correlation doesn't prove causation, She cited numerous case studies where documented bites occurred immediately after owners attempted alpha rolls and other techniques popularized by Milan's programs. When given the opportunity to speak before sentencing, Milan expressed remorse for any animals that may have been harmed, but maintained that his intentions had always been to save dogs who would otherwise be euthanized. "I dedicated my life to helping dogs and their owners live in harmony," Milan said, his voice breaking. "I never intended harm. I only wanted to show people that troubled dogs could be rehabilitated. If my methods were wrong, it was from lack of formal education, not from lack of love for animals." Milan spoke about his humble beginnings in Mexico and his journey to America, where he built his career from nothing. "I came to this country with no money and no English, just a dream to work with dogs," he told the court. "Everything I did was to give dogs a second chance when others had given up on them." He acknowledged his lack of formal education, but defended his practical experience. "I learned by working with dogs, not from books or classrooms. Perhaps there were better ways I could have learned, but I always believed I was helping. If I failed these animals, it was a failure of knowledge, not of heart." Judge Ramirez acknowledged Milan's lack of prior criminal history, but emphasized the scale of impact his platform had created. "Your influence extended to millions of people who trusted your expertise," she stated. "The evidence shows a pattern of prioritizing business success and television ratings over animal welfare, and of deliberately concealing negative." The impact of Milan's conviction extends far beyond his personal circumstances. Television networks have already begun removing his programs from their platforms, and publishers have pulled his books from circulation. Training centers that had been licensed to use his name and methods are rapidly rebranding, and pet supply companies have discontinued product lines associated with him. National Geographic, which aired Milan's shows for years, issued a statement expressing regret. "In light of the evidence presented during the trial, we are removing all content featuring Cesar Milan from our platforms. We apologize to our viewers for promoting methods that have been shown to cause harm and commit to featuring only science-based, humane training methods in our future programming." Major pet retailers PetSmart and Petco announced they would discontinue selling all products associated with Milan's brand and would review their training class curricula to ensure they reflected current scientific understanding of dog behavior. Both companies also committed to additional training for their staff to recognize and discourage aversive training methods. The case has prompted calls for greater regulation of animal training services and certification requirements for those who market themselves as behavioral experts. Several state legislatures are now considering bills that would establish formal licensing requirements for dog trainers and behaviorists, similar to those in other professional fields. California State Senator Maria Rodriguez has introduced legislation that would require "We're seeing a major shift in awareness," said Robert Jenkins of the American Humane Association. "People who genuinely love their dogs and thought they were doing the right thing are now questioning everything they've been taught about dog training. There's a lot of guilt, but also a tremendous hunger for better information." The trial has sparked a broader conversation about media responsibility when presenting expert advice. Media ethicist Dr. Eleanor Martinez commented, "Television programs presenting themselves as educational bear a responsibility to ensure the information they're sharing is scientifically sound, especially when it influences how people treat vulnerable beings like animals. Entertainment value cannot take precedence over accuracy when real harm can result." For the countless dogs trained under Milan's methods, the legacy is complicated. Rehabilitation specialists report being overwhelmed with requests to help animals suffering from behavioral issues linked to dominance-based training techniques, with many owners now questioning approaches they previously trusted without hesitation. Dr. Karen Sullivan, a veterinary behaviorist in Los Angeles, described seeing a surge in cases. "We're working with many dogs who have been subjected to these methods and are showing classic signs of training-induced trauma. The good news is that with proper, humane approaches, many of these dogs can recover. The bad news is that some of the damage may be permanent." In what many see as a final irony, reports have emerged that the prison where Milan will serve his sentence participates in a dog training program that uses exclusively positive reinforcement methods to prepare shelter dogs for adoption. The program, which allows selected inmates to train dogs using modern, force-free techniques, has been recognized for its high success rate and contributions to both animal welfare and inmate rehabilitation. As Milan begins his sentence, the empire he built over 2 decades lies in ruins. a cautionary tale about the responsibilities that come with influence, and the consequences when that influence leads people astray. For a man who rose from undocumented immigrant to household name on his claimed ability to understand dogs, the greatest irony may be that it was ultimately the animals themselves whose silent testimony proved most damning. In the wake of the verdict, a new generation of trainers and behaviorists are working to fill the void with approaches grounded in modern science and a deeper understanding of the canine mind. For millions of dog owners worldwide, the fall of the dog whisperer marks not just the end of an era, but the beginning of a more enlightened approach to our relationship with man's best friend.